Ohio, known to many through its big cities and steel factories, actually has a quieter side. Small towns slowly losing their people, empty main roads, and old buildings left alone with the wind. And that's where our story begins. This time, we're diving into 15 small towns in Ohio that have been, or may soon be, abandoned. These aren't just empty places, but spaces filled with traces of history. Each of these towns faded in its own way. Some were lost to dam projects, some vanished when railroads shut down, others declined with the economy, and a few simply faded with time. But it's in that silence that the most interesting stories begin to surface. Ready to explore an unseen side of Ohio? Let's get started. Fallsville is like a little village slowly disappearing from the map, but its traces still spark curiosity. It was founded in the early 1800s, starting out as a small settlement near a waterfall. People came to use the flowing water to power grain or corn mills. But like many small Ohio communities, Fallsville never truly grew. When the local industries faded and people moved away to find work, the town got quieter. Eventually, the last buildings were left behind, and Fallsville officially became Ohio's version of a ghost town. What's interesting is that the Fallsville area is now a nature preserve. You can hike the trails and realize you're walking through what used to be a village, with families, small shops, and everyday life. There are no buildings left, just silence. But that's what gives Fallsville its peaceful ghost town vibe, more elegant than spooky. Next up is King Station, one of Ohio's small ghost towns that once thrived because of the railroad. It appeared in the 1800s as a stop on the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad, a major line connecting mining towns and small communities in southeast Ohio. For decades, the sound of trains, cargo being moved, and the flow of passengers kept this place alive. But when the line was shut down and train service ended, King Station lost its only source of life. Slowly, people moved away, stores closed, and the buildings were left to time. Today, King Station sits within Zaleski State Forest, and some physical remains can still be found. You can spot old building foundations, parts of the rail line buried under dirt, and a flat area where the small station once stood. Oreton shows another side of towns that died with the loss of their lifeblood. But unlike King Station, which rose with the rails, Oreton existed because of mining. It began in the late 1800s as a mining community in Jackson County. Back when coal and iron ore were driving Ohio's industry, this town was alive. Tight rows of houses, shops open early, the sound of mining carts, and dirt roads used to haul the minerals into town. But Oreton's fate was tied directly to the earth. When the resources ran low and companies left, the town lost its jobs overnight. People moved out, schools shut down, and buildings slowly collapsed. Now, Oreton is just old foundations hidden deep in the woods. Not much physical structure remains, but that's what makes it feel like King Station's distant cousin. Both quiet, both abandoned, but born of very different beginnings. While Oreton faded away because its underground resources ran dry, the story of Tappan Lake is very different. A village here disappeared because of a massive project that changed Ohio's landscape forever. From the forest silence of Oreton, we moved to Harrison County, where a small community once stood before it was swallowed by water. Tappan Lake Village used to be a quiet settlement, filled with wooden houses, small gardens, and dirt roads that connected people to local shops. Everything changed in the 1930s when the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District decided to build a large dam to control flooding. That project created the Tappan Lake we know today, but also drowned the entire village that once existed in the valley. After a village lost to water, we come to Pomeroy, a small town by the Ohio River that still stands, but many say it has the feel of a place slowly fading. In its heyday, Pomeroy was full of life. It grew rapidly in the 19th century thanks to coal and its bustling river port. In fact, Pomeroy was once known as the only town in America that didn't need in a wheeled fire truck, because every building sat along the river. Just pull up a boat, spray, and done. Pretty wild, right? But its golden era ended when the coal industry declined and large riverboats stopped making stops. The town's population kept dropping, stores began to close, and entire blocks started to look empty. It hasn't become a ghost town just yet, but many areas feel like they're only half alive. Pomeroy still has rows of old buildings facing the river, old train tracks, and steep stairways that feel like a time machine to the past. It's a town that's still standing, but clearly fighting to stay alive. Middleport, Pomeroy's neighbor, shares a similar story, but its tone is a bit softer and more reflective. Still in Meigs County, Middleport once thrived from a mix of river trade, the salt industry, and the railroad. The town had factories, warehouses, and rows of busy brick buildings during the late 1800s and early 1900s. But once the salt industry faded and steamboats stopped docking, Middleport began to feel like a town where time moves more slowly than anywhere else. Its population shrank, some stores closed for good, and many old buildings now sit empty, staring out at the river. It hasn't been fully abandoned, but there are so many corners that make you feel like you're walking through a place where life is gradually turning down its volume. McConnelsville feels like the next chapter, a small town that still stands, but is clearly struggling to keep its long breath going. Located in Morgan County, McConnelsville once grew rapidly during the coal and railroad era. The town features a grand courthouse, an old theater, and rows of brick buildings that show how important this area was in the early 1900s. The problem came when local industries declined and younger generations moved away to bigger cities. McConnelsville began losing much of its driving force. The population slowly dropped, and family-owned businesses became harder to find. What keeps McConnelsville interesting is the Twin City Opera House, a 1890s-era theater still standing with its classic charm. Many say they've heard footsteps on the balcony or faint whispers when the building is empty. Not scary, more like echoes from the past. From the quiet, fading charm of McConnelsville, we move toward the banks of the Ohio River, to Martin's Ferry, an old industrial town once alive with the clang of steel mills. Here, Ohio shows how time can both build up and wear down the identity of a place. Martin's Ferry used to be home to thousands of workers rising early, clocking in at the mills, and coming home with faces covered in metallic dust. Now, many warehouses stand as hollow frames, like monuments without plaques. Interestingly, this is also the hometown of writer James Wright, whose poems often captured the pain of industry and working-class life. It fits, because every corner of Martin's Ferry still reflects a heavy, yet poetic past. In the Ohio River Valley, this town isn't a ghost town, but a place still fighting to survive in a world that has changed far too fast. Just a few minutes west, the journey continues to Bridgeport, a small town that feels like the faded shadow of its own neighbor. Bridgeport once thrived from the flow of steel and coal workers moving along the Ohio River. But when the industry collapsed, the town seemed to lose its direction. The main road is still in use, but old shops with faded signs give off the feeling of a past that never left. Not dead, not fully alive, more like a town caught in a long pause. Surprisingly, this little town had a wild reputation back in the early 20th century, from rowdy bars to secret gambling joints, all fueled by its strategic spot as a gateway from West Virginia. Today, those stories are all that remain, but the gritty, tough border town atmosphere still lingers. Following the banks of the Ohio River brings us to Bellaire, a town once nicknamed the Glass City because it was the biggest center of glass production in the area. Right as you enter, the first impression is unique. Old but still active train tracks, classic steel bridges, and red stone buildings that echo the town's 19th century glory days. Bellaire used to attract skilled workers in droves, with glass factories, coal operations, and river shipyards. The city was booming. In fact, some of its architects even found their way into the film world. Fun fact, Bellaire is known for the iconic stone bridge featured in the 2010 movie Unstoppable. But like many industrial towns in the Ohio Valley, things gradually faded as factories shut down. In some corners, new murals and small local businesses have started to pop up, like Bellaire is trying to rewrite its old script, but in a simpler, more modest tone. From Bellaire's industrial charm, we move to Springfield, a town once proudly called the Champion City, but now often ranked among the most at-risk places for population decline in Ohio. It's not completely empty, but the fading trace of its industrial success has left behind vacant spaces that slowly turned into ghost pockets. Back in the day, Springfield was a global manufacturing hub. In the early 1900s, it was known as the largest producer of farm equipment and bicycles in America. Major companies once made Springfield a key headquarters, but after waves of deindustrialization, the population kept dropping, from its peak of 82,000 to just around 58,000 today. Springfield fits our theme because parts of it feel like a city whose story paused halfway through. From Springfield, we head back down to the Ohio River and arrive at Steubenville, a city once proudly called the City of Murals, but now more often described as a place on the edge of emptiness. Not completely abandoned, but with many corners that feel forgotten by time. Steubenville was once a steel powerhouse, with factories that lit up the nights with non-stop work. It's also the hometown of Dean Martin, the Hollywood icon who remains a local legend. But when the steel industry collapsed, the population followed, shrinking from nearly 37,000 in the 1970s to about 17,000 today. Some parts of town still show signs of life, while others feel like pages from a book left unturned. Steubenville isn't a full ghost town, but it has ghost zones. areas that feel like they belong to a city that once stood tall, then shrank too fast. Dayton, a city with a big name, yet many of its parts are slowly losing their pulse. Dayton isn't a full ghost town, but it has plenty of quiet pockets, areas that feel abandoned even though the downtown core is still active. Once a symbol of innovation, Dayton was the birthplace of the Wright brothers and a hub for aviation, manufacturing, and research. In the 1960s, General Motors, NCR, and hundreds of small businesses kept the city busy with workers. Its population once soared past 260,000. But after industrial decline set in, the factories began to close down one by one. People moved away in search of new jobs, and now the population has dropped to around 134,000. It's a city with a legacy of invention, but scattered with silent zones that give it the feel of an urban ghost town. In fact, parts of West Dayton often rank among the most abandoned neighborhoods in Ohio. From Dayton, we move to Forest, a small village in Hardin County that hasn't quite become a ghost town, but already shows signs of early quiet. Forest originally grew as a key stop along the Cincinnati, Sandusky, and Cleveland Railroad. Back in the 1880s, it had a hotel, a furniture store, a sawmill, and even 2 local newspapers. For a village, that was a bustling scene. But once the train stopped running and trade shifted to bigger cities, Forest gradually lost its economic purpose. Its population now sits around 1,400, and many old Victorian-era buildings are left abandoned. Interestingly, Forest has become a favorite destination for urban explorers because of its history. The old rail line area, aging warehouses, and neglected blocks give off a stillness where every step seems to echo. And finally, there's Wharton, a small village in Wyandotte County, often called almost a ghost town because of its stillness, as if time has stopped there. Wharton once thrived thanks to the Toledo and Ohio Central Railroad. In the early 1900s, it had general stores, a mill, workshops, and rows of worker homes full of life. But as the railroad faded from the economy, Wharton began to slowly dim. Its population is now around 300, and many of its 19th century buildings still stand, caught somewhere between decay and preservation. What's striking is that Wharton carries a rare old Americana vibe. Wooden houses in vintage styles, a small church still standing strong, and inactive rail tracks all add to the melancholic charm of a town trapped between the past and an uncertain future. Wharton isn't gone, but it shows how a place can shrink until it nearly vanishes from the map.